Hey, and welcome back. So this is a video that I've actually been meaning to do for longer than I care to admit, a few years actually. It's the second one of these setups that I've built, this one slightly differently for a rooftop tent. What makes it unique is that it allows you to mount traditional cross rails or crossbars over top your bed of your pickup truck while maintaining the tonneau cover. A lot of the systems that exist on the market is kind of one or the other, and we've managed to achieve both with this. Both setups involve a little bit of customization. This one uses some custom brackets I'll get into later, but for the most part, a goal of the system was to use off-the-shelf componentry so that if you had an issue somewhere, if you're on the road or vacation, then you can find a fix for it. So I'm going to break it down component by component. Beginning with the tonneau cover. Both systems use a backflip tonneau cover. This one happens to be a G2. My mom's uses an MX4, which I actually prefer. It's a better tonneau cover, has a few extra features that this doesn't have. It's lighter weight. From there, we purchase what are considered replacement rails for the CS series backflip. Now, CS in Backflip's line stands for Contractor Series. And the reason being is it's sold with the tonneau, with the side rails, with uprights, angle brackets, and proprietary crossbars. But we didn't want to go that way for a couple of reasons. So for my mom's truck, we bought 2 of the uprights, 2 of the angle brackets, and 2 Jetstream bars by Yakima. And the reason being is for that setup, one of the bars was going to go over the back and one of the bars was going to go over the front of the cab for purposes of carrying a canoe. And so we needed the ability to use the traditional feet that would mount onto the vehicle itself. And we wanted to be able to pair that with the back so that we can use the more widely available accessories for, say, canoe and kayak mounts. For this setup, it's a little different, where I wanted to mount the rooftop tent as low as possible, and thus I needed a much lower bracket. Though I did look around and contact some manufacturers, I ended up having these custom made. They are arguably overbuilt, and the reason for that is I did see one YouTuber who had a similar style rack over the back, and the jostling movement side to side ended up shearing one of the brackets. Now, I don't remember if that was an aluminum bracket or steel. These are manufactured out of steel because steel has a greater resistance to metal fatigue, where constant sort of bending or force put in a particular location, steel will sort of spring back more. And it was really important to me when I manufactured these brackets that it had one consistent radius. So these are done over a single die, it's a single press, as opposed to, say, some other brackets which might use multiple angles. From here, I used 4 hardware on each bracket because the way that it works is there's a channel in the end where you slide the nylock nut inside as you're sliding the brackets on and you're tightening it in. So the only thing on the inside of the side rails here are just the faces of those nuts. And if you only have 2, that's a lot of force being concentrated on just a very low amount of surface area. So I wanted to have as many hardware to distribute that force evenly. So as mentioned, these are custom. I'm still toying around with the idea of manufacturing them or selling them in a small batch. I've talked to the manufacturer, everything's ready to go. We prototyped it and then produced these. I did actually receive these just a few days before a trip, so they received 1 quick coat of bed liner that I happen to have just lying around, just the rattle can style. So they've started to oxidize a little bit on the bottom, but I would be able to get them powder coated, probably just in a matte black. From here, we attach the crossbars. Now, as mentioned, these are the Yakima Jetstream crossbars, which we've used in both setups. And it's really important because these are actually 70-inch bars, 7-0. And they are the only manufacturer that I'm aware of that is producing an arrow-shaped bar in this width. There are a couple of downsides to these bars, but they also have a couple of real specific upsides compared to other manufacturers. So far, I like them overall, more positives than negatives. To mount the crossbars to the brackets, I have used an off-the-shelf hardware. Again, it was really important for me to have something so that if you were going down a trail or if you backed into a tree, you know, parking your camper, something like that, caused damage to the crossbars or something like that, or maybe sheared the hardware, it would be easily replaceable. So I am using Thule X-Adapt 12. They're a square head that slides into the channel on the bottom, and they go through the actual brackets. From there, I'm using some stainless washers and some stainless nylon locks. There are 3 bolts on the bottom side, again, to distribute force, so that as you're putting weight on the crossbars, the crossbar, you know, may want to lift up. So there's 3 bolting into the bottom that's making it very secure and distributing that force across it, also helping with lateral shear loads that those bolts are going to experience. So I've removed the end cap here, and as you can see with this extruded aluminum crossbar, there's a channel here. And in that channel, there is a rubber fill strip that clips up and inside of it. Now, in order to fit or accommodate those X-Adapt 12 square head studs going down, which actually are traditionally meant to go up to mount different accessories, some trimming is required. I trimmed that rubber all the way flush, and I didn't need to do that. I could have left the say 2 or 3 millimeter thickness of this extruded aluminum. I made it more difficult on myself trying to get a nice flush look to it, but actually, in fact, I could have left that little bit extra. But effectively what you do is you trim back a, I believe it's a 2 centimeter by 2 centimeter section of the component of that fill strip. And I just used a standard schoolyard hole punch. It does require a little bit of force. And I punch a hole. You just simply drop the stud through and you slide those X-Adapt 12s into the channel facing downwards. So one key feature that I wanted to go for with regards to this rooftop tent, as I'm sure you've noticed by now, is to actually hard mount it straight to the cross rails. Traditionally, rooftop tents have a extruded aluminum channel, 2 of them in fact, that run along the base longitudinally with the vehicle. And those are actually what sit on your cross rails. And then they use a combination of bolts and a bracket to secure the tent or those rails to your cross rails. I didn't want to do that for 2 reasons. The first, again, I wanted something as low as possible. So being able to eliminate that equipment, I'm with a 2-person tent that this is, I'm not worried about sagging in the middle of the tent because the structure of this particular model is strong enough to support the weight, and the holes that were already in place on the tent base itself were close enough that they were more or less aligned underneath your body positions anyways. So your body weight would predominantly go straight down onto these rails. So I was able to get it lower for height reasons, so I can actually mount the tent lower for better aerodynamics and fuel economy, as well as better clearance. Admittingly, I could have actually gone up probably another 4 or 6 inches from here, and I can do that very easily with new brackets. The other advantage is theft deterrence. So by hard mounting it, somebody is not able to just come in here with a basic hardware store ratchet and socket and remove those clamps and pick up, you know, what is a $3,000–4,000 tent and walk away with it. And lastly, I really didn't like the idea of mounting those aluminum rails lengthwise on top of the cross rails. I just didn't want to get into needing to pad it. As it is, I am running a rubber strip along the base of the tent underneath to gain a little bit of height so that the tent body can unfold easier, and as well to protect the actual cross rails. These are quite expensive. I think these were about $300 Canadian for the pair, so I'd like to take care of it if possible. So there's definitely a few advantages to hard mounting it. To do that, I needed to create 2 biscuits per rail. Now each biscuit was then drilled and tapped for the corresponding hardware that I mounted through the tent body itself. And likewise, they slide in the upper channel and then mount too. Now, that was a little bit of a trick and required 2 kicks at the can with a bit of brainstorming with friends. But what we found the best solution was to pre-install the hardware into the tent body. And then, you know, with the tent upside down, we were able to align the biscuits and hand thread in the bolts into the cross rails, at which point we could pre-mount the brackets, flip it all upright, and then slide it on the vehicle as one complete assembly. So likewise, if I want to take the tent off, I'd undo the hardware here, which again, I've used stainless steel tamper-resistant hardware, and I just slide it off. My initial plan was to be able to do that. I will admit with 16 bolts, when you're sliding it on, each nylock has to be oriented in its proper position to fit into this extruded aluminum side rail. So it's in effect, you know, a 3-person job, 2 people to hold the tent and walk it off, and 1 person to, you know, individually align each locking nuts. So for that reason, and for the added weight over the back of the vehicle in the wintertime for traction, I've just left it as it is. I want to circle back on the brackets for a second. So again, I mentioned, you know, with the tent hard mounted onto here, I could have actually made the brackets higher, and I may yet do that. One advantage, like I said, is having it lower, which means accessing and egressing is very, very easy. So if you have a large dog, you're able to lift that dog to what is effectively shoulder height as opposed to overhead height. But I could have gone up in a little bit more height. That would have allowed me to gain a little bit better entry with a tri-fold style tonneau cover like this. One thing to point out though, with having the tent mounted low as I have it here, is that if you're considering the optional annex, those are typically designed to be mounted at about 6 feet in height, because the door opening will extend all the way down to the ground. So if you're mounting it low like this, it does kind of preclude you from being able to use that. Truthfully though, I don't think they're a very great design because I've toured them and you can see in pictures as well. By the time the ladder is extended down, it extends down right in the middle of your annex. And there's not a lot of room to move around, and you can't retract that ladder in order to gain more utility, because that ladder is integral to stabilizing the tent above it. So that was not a feature that was really important to me, so that might be a consideration for you if you're really dead set on an annex. I think myself, I would rather have maybe a full-size dining tent that's, you know, detachable, or in a setup like this, if I wasn't concerned about underground parking, I might do a traditional roof rack up here and then side mount one of those 180-degree awnings that would come out and provide even a greater coverage. So some options to consider. But overall, like I said, I wanted to put this together just simply to show you that it is possible to have both a tonneau cover to secure your personal items, as well as a rack, and that you aren't bound by you know, the fixed height of some that are much higher. So to wrap this up, I just wanted to say thanks for watching, and I appreciate it. Like I mentioned earlier, these brackets are something that I would love to be able to sell. However, the logistics associated with setting up a website, payment terminal, an LLC, you know, business insurance, that sort of thing, there's a lot of upfront business costs associated with it. And I don't truthfully know how many of these brackets that I would be able to sell to compensate for that. So, you know, it's a shame, because I'm really actually proud of what we were able to create. I love going through the prototyping, design, and testing and final fitment to arrive at, you know, what is effectively a production-ready product. It was produced by a manufacturer here in Alberta that's a huge manufacturer that does, you know, multi-million-dollar projects. They were all CAD designed, laser cut to precision. That said, I also kind of want to take this as an opportunity to kind of talk about products. There's two specifically that I'm working towards, and I have been working towards for quite some time now. The two happen to be, you know, progressing in parallel at the same time, and they happen to be, you know, all based on the same subject content. And I really love the design process of creating products. Customizing things has never really scared me, and when I know that there's a better way to do something, or maybe not even a better way, but a way that achieves other goals and objectives compared to what's on the market, I like to be able to do that, and these brackets and this setup in general is a great example of that. So that's something I plan on talking about in the future. Keep an eye out for an upcoming video, because I do want to make a video talking about what I would like to do with this channel, the types of videos I would like to create. I really just need to sit down and do it. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. And if you have any questions at all about this setup or which particular parts were included, please let me know. And if you have any interest in these brackets, I would really appreciate kind of gauging that interest as well. So thanks very much. You take care. We'll see you in another one. And bye for now.